We have an absolute bombshell that's just dropped, and it's coming from multiple high-level sources, including Reuters and the Financial Times, reporting on a brand new U.S.-drafted peace framework for ending the war in Ukraine. But let me tell you right away, this isn't some balanced compromise. It's a plan that demands massive concessions from Kyiv almost entirely on Russia's terms, and the U.S. is reportedly signaling to President Zelensky that he has to accept the core of it if he wants any chance at peace. So let's break this down step by step because this could fundamentally change the trajectory of the entire conflict, which is now dragged into its fourth year with no end in sight as of late 2025. First off, the reporting says the United States has been working quietly, often through back channels with Russian officials, to put together this proposal. And it's been presented to Ukrainian leaders in recent days, including during meetings involving Trump's special envoys. The key elements are brutal for Ukraine. According to sources familiar with the document, Kyiv would have to formally cede territory, specifically the remaining parts of the Donbas region that are still under Ukrainian control, even though Russian forces don't fully occupy the administrative borders of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. This isn't just freezing the lines where they are today. This would mean handing over cities, towns, and land that Ukrainian soldiers are still defending and dying to defend right now. On top of that, the plan calls for recognizing Russian control over Crimea and the other occupied areas in the south, like parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia, essentially locking in about 20% of Ukraine's territory as lost forever. But it doesn't stop at land. The proposal demands a significant reduction in the size of Ukraine's armed forces. Some reports say cutting it by as much as half from its current wartime levels, which are already stretched thin, and it includes giving up certain categories of weapons, particularly long-range systems that can strike deep into Russia, things like ATACMS, or similar capabilities that Ukraine has begged for and only recently started receiving in limited numbers. There are also hints at no foreign troops on Ukrainian soil after any deal, which would block things like European peacekeepers or training missions, and a rollback of some U.S. military assistance, meaning Ukraine could be left far more vulnerable if Russia decides to tear up the agreement down the line. Now, where is this coming from? Well, the Trump administration has made no secret that it wants this war over fast. President Trump promised during the campaign to end it quickly, and his team has been engaging directly with Moscow, including through envoys like Steve Witkoff, meeting Russian counterparts. Sources say this framework builds on ideas discussed in previous summits and reflects input from both sides, but let's be real. When you look at the details, it's heavily tilted toward Russia's long-standing demands. Putin has insisted from the beginning on territorial recognition, demilitarization of Ukraine, neutrality, meaning no NATO, and limits on Kyiv's army. This plan checks almost all those boxes while offering Ukraine very little in return. Vague promises of security guarantees, maybe some economic aid for reconstruction, but nothing concrete like NATO membership or ironclad defenses against future aggression. And the timing couldn't be worse for Zelensky. Ukraine is facing grinding Russian advances in the east, especially around Pokrovsk and Kharkov. They're dealing with massive strikes on energy infrastructure as winter hits, and now a major corruption scandal at home that's led to cabinet dismissals and shaken donor confidence. Allies in Europe are nervous about reduced U.S. support under the new administration, and Kyiv knows that without American weapons and money, holding the line becomes exponentially harder. So the message from Washington seems clear. Accept these concessions now, or risk fighting on with one hand tied behind your back. Of course, Ukraine's response so far is predictable. This is a non-starter. Zelensky has repeatedly said territorial integrity is sacred. It's even written into the Constitution. Ceding land would be political suicide. And many in Kyiv see this as rewarding aggression, giving Putin exactly what he wanted when he launched the full-scale invasion back in 2022. They argue that any deal like this would just be a pause, letting Russia rearm, regroup, and strike again in a few years, just like after 2014 with Crimea and Donbas. And honestly, history is on their side. Russia has broken ceasefires before. Minsk agreements, anyone? From the Russian side, there's been no public enthusiasm. Putin continues to demand full withdrawal from the 4 annexed regions, plus neutrality and demilitarization. They haven't budged. And why would they, when they're slowly gaining ground, even if it's at horrific cost? The Kremlin denied major changes to their position just days ago. So if this plan is meant to pressure both sides, it feels like the pressure is almost entirely on Ukraine. Broader picture. What does this mean for Europe, NATO, the whole global order?
If this goes through, it sets a dangerous precedent that invading a neighbor, redrawing borders by force, and holding the world hostage with escalation threats actually works. The US walking away or forcing capitulation could fracture transatlantic unity. Europeans are already talking about stepping up their own defense spending because they can't fully rely on America anymore. And for Ukraine, it could mean the effective end of their dream of full sovereignty and Western integration, at least in the way they fought for it these past years. On the flip side, supporters of a quick deal argue the war is unwinnable for Ukraine at this point. Russia has the manpower advantage, the industrial base for artillery and drones, and they're willing to absorb insane losses to keep going. Hundreds of thousands dead or wounded on both sides, cities obliterated, economies in ruins. Why prolong the suffering if a deal can stop the killing? Even if it's painful and unfair. Realism over idealism, they say. And with Trump in office pushing America first, ending the billions in aid makes sense domestically. Personally, I think this plan as leaked is dead on arrival without major revisions. Zelensky can't sell total capitulation to his people who've sacrificed so much, but pressure will mount if US aid starts drying up. We could see frantic diplomacy in the coming weeks, maybe direct talks or a summit, but right now this feels like the opening salvo in a very tough negotiation where Ukraine holds the weak hand. What do you think? Is this the bitter pill Ukraine has to swallow for peace, or a betrayal that will only encourage more aggression? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more updates on this fast-moving story, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching, stay informed, and we'll talk soon.